Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement. It's the podcast with you in mind. I'm your host, Tony Roig. It's a pleasure to be with you again this week. As you know by now, perhaps, or maybe you don't, so I'm going to tell you again, we're going to single subject podcasts on the Friday podcast. The reason behind it is we want to make sure that we can stay on task, right? Stay on one subject, not just as your podcast host, but also you as a listener, because the mental part of pickleball is a process, and we want to make sure that we can bite off one thing at a time. So what we're doing now is we're going to have single subjects during the regular Friday podcast drops. And then if there's a riff or something else that is of interest, a special guest or something like that, we'll bring those to you another day of the week, generally on Monday in our special episodes. So that's the format that we're going to be pursuing from here on out. If you like the new format or don't like the new format, you can let us know at therapy@betterpickleball.com. Also, let us know if there's a subject that's of interest to you. We're overdue for a mailbag episode, and that'll be coming out in the not-too-distant future. So let us know if there's anything out there that has been vexing you or something that's been happening that you have questions about regarding your pickleball game. And speaking of questions and answers, that is the topic of today's podcast. We're going to talk about how do we get to the right answer. As pickleball players, we often have questions and about pickleball and what shot should I hit here and what should I do in this situation. And if you want to get to the right answer, you first have to start with the right question. And we're going to talk about that during today's podcast. I want to remind you that if you're interested in learning or being coached by CJ and myself, make sure you check out our Pickleball Academy. There's some courses and offerings that we have that are coming out inside our Better Pickleball Academy. And also we have our upcoming camps in 2024 that should have some spots left by the time you listen to this podcast. If not, then, we'll see you next time. But probably some spots left there for you if you go to betterpickleball.com and check it out. And you get to learn the way that we teach pickleball, which is a different way of approaching the game. It's in our experience, a more productive and engaging way of playing pickleball, and it'll generate the results that you're looking for. All right, so let's jump into this idea of finding the right answer and starting with the right question. Pickleball players, and I mean this as a compliment, pickleball players are curious beings, have lots of questions. And again, total compliment, not a criticism at all. In our camps, our students inside the pickleball system, there are question upon question upon question about pickleball. And again, compliment, I think it's fantastic that we remain curious about this sport because we're passionate about it. And we want to know more about it. We want to learn how to do things better. We want to feel more confident out there, more competent out there when we play pickleball. But what we normally try and do in our teaching is, rather than just simply answering the one question, is we try to provide you with a framework. We try and give you a structure within which you can answer the questions yourself. It's that old saying about teach a person to fish, or give a person a fish and you feed him once, teach him how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Same approach. What we're trying to do is say, okay, let's see how we can frame this question in a way that or give you the framing for a question in a way that you can find the answer to this one question, as well as questions that may arise in the future. And I'll give you an example of a question that was posed and how we approached it so you can see how this works. So the question was posed by one of our system members, and the question had to do with playing on the return side, particularly to the four-shot. And the idea was balancing out the objectives of the return side with the type of four-shot being hit without it overextending, without going too far to make an error. And so the question is, how do you avoid that? How do you avoid overextending and potentially making an error in connection with achieving your objectives on the return side? And so rather than simply answering that question, which we could have done, we responded with a framing, which it's called the FOSS approach. It's something we use inside the pickleball system, which is framework, objectives, strategies, and shots. And we basically framed out the question that was being asked in a way that the system student, sometimes we refer to them as TPS. It's got to become an acronym. So TPS student could respond themselves, right? They could come up with the answer themselves. Because here's the thing about pickleball. There are lots of variables. And that's a beautiful aspect of our sport. You may have heard me refer to this before, that, nothing against sports like cornhole and things like that. It's a fine activity to engage in. I don't know if it's a sport or not, but pastime, whatever it is. It's a fine activity. It's great, but it's static. And what I mean by that is you're always standing so many feet apart from the hole, right? The board with the hole. The bean bags you're tossing weigh the same, unless there's wind or something like that. There's no variables. And you're playing a little bit against another player, because if they block you some, you have to modify your tosses a little bit. But in theory, you could learn how to toss the beanbag along an arc that would always just basically dive into that hole. So again, fine activity, not a lot of variables. Pickleball, lots of variables. Forget about wind, forget about external variables like that. Let's just talk about the variables of a rally. We're talking about you, and just breaking you down. I need to know, to give you an exact answer, I would need to know, like, is your forehand stronger or your backhand stronger? What shots can you hit off this side or the other side? Where's the ball that you're trying to hit? Is the ball on your left side, your right side, in front of you, going behind you? Is it deep towards you? Is it way in front of you? You're going to have to be reaching forward to hit it. Is it way to one side or the other where you're going to have to be reaching away? How proficient are you at that shot, right? And then the next question is, now we have to look at, like, okay, where's my partner, right? Because that may affect the type of shot that I hit. Also, where are my opponents? Where's the player on the left side and the right side of the court? How deep are they in the court? Are they up in the non-volley zone? Are they not? How far left, what's their positioning left to right? What are their strengths and weaknesses, right? I don't want to be hitting the ball to their strong side if I'm playing in a competitive environment. I want to hit it to their weak side. Is there a weakness of theirs that I can exploit in that situation? So there's all sorts of variables, and I didn't even bring up wind and type of ball being used. I mean, surface you're playing on, just a great number of variables when you're playing this sport, and it's awesome. It's amazing and awesome that we have that many variables, because that's what keeps us mentally young, right? Keeps us challenged out there. We're just having to solve these puzzles every time we play, depending on who the opponents are, what formation they're in, what kind of situation we're in, all of that. And I referred to this in a previous podcast as like this, having like a Rolodex approach, which basically you're trying to like come up with a particular answer to a particular question. The limitation of that approach is that then you're going to have 100,000 answers, right? And you have to have them stored in your brain in a way that you can pull them out when you need them. Instead, a better approach is to have this more fundamentally sound way of asking the question that then allows you to pursue the answer yourself, given the framework of the game as you understand it. I'll give you a concrete example you can use is one that we use when we talk about partners playing with each other. A lot of times the question is, or the issue that comes up is like, that was my shot or that was your shot. And it's not that necessarily is wrong way to ask it, but we don't ask the question that way. The way that we ask the question is, what was the best shot for our team? Once I frame the question that way, right? So that's where the framing of the question becomes important. Once I frame the question as, what was the best shot for my team? A lot of variables that don't matter fall away. For instance, was it a forehand or a backhand? It's not the top question, right? Forehand in the middle kind of a thing. All that kind of falls away because perhaps it is the forehand that would have been the better shot there, but not necessarily. Because let's say my backhand is stronger than my forehand or than your forehand, and I'm up at the line and you're not. Things like that, right? You can work through it in a more constructive way by asking the base question being, what's the best shot for my team? You also get away from ego considerations. That was my shot or my ball, or that was your ball. Doesn't matter because that's not the question. The question is, what was the best shot for my team? The center line disappears. The center line is one of those areas of the court that I wish we could make disappear after the rally begins. That goes away if you ask the question correctly. So as you think about puzzle solving in pickleball, consider evaluating the way that you're framing the question before you try and arrive at an answer. If you're a system member, the FOSS approach, going back to the FOSS approach and your objectives and the framework of the game, is absolutely going to change how you approach answering the questions that come up when you play. If you're not in a system member, I highly recommend you check it out. When you're ready for it, because it's just the most comprehensive training platform of its kind in pickleball. So when you're ready, it's there for you. I hope you join us in one of the classes if you're not already in there. But even if you're not a system member, use your understanding of the framework of the pickleball to ask the right questions. The one I just gave you can use when you're playing with a partner. What was the best shot for my team? And then you work from there backwards, and you're going to find the right answer because you're starting with the right question. All right. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. That framing is so important, and it'll really help you play better pickleball and just think about the game more fully and more deeply, with more meaningfully is the word I was reaching for there. And it really just, it's a better way, it's a more productive way of thinking about the game of pickleball. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review it. As always, it helps us, reach other players. So if you have a moment, we appreciate you doing that, and share it with your friends, because if you enjoyed the podcast, they probably will too. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next time.